Hello readers, welcome back to PJL Books and welcome to today's showcase. Now today's showcase is for Deadpool, and through Deadpool I would like to talk about what makes a good parody. Yeah, parody, lampoon, satire, poking fun, whatever you call it, we all like to see the good name of a brand or genre pointed and laughed at, even if we're a fan of the straight genre itself. And yet, while we all love a good parody, it's probably the type of movie with the worst good movie to bad movie ratio. For every Naked Gun or Airplane you have half a dozen scary movies, excepting the first one perhaps. We all know a bad parody when we see one, and yet what separates these from the good parodies? Is it just a case of not being funny? Or is there something more deep here, something more going on? So to dig deeper, we have a prime example of the parody genre to look at. Yes, what better than Deadpool? Now, before you jump down my throat and remind me that no, Deadpool isn't a parody movie, it's a proper superhero movie and Deadpool is just self-aware, yes, I totally get where you're coming from, but if you look at the definition of a parody, that it is a humorous or satirical imitation of a serious piece of literature or writing, then we find that yes, Deadpool falls well within those parameters. And let's be honest here, Deadpool fans, I think we all know how Deadpool would feel about pedantic definitions. Besides, Deadpool has all the hallmarks of a good parody. Of course, it's funny, but why is it funny? A great deal of the humour wouldn't have been half as effective if Deadpool had been released 10 or even 5 years ago. It needed that, pardon the pun, deep pool of existing superhero genre movies to draw upon, as well as enough source material of the tropes and cliches of that genre that, by sheer mass of the number of Marvel and DC comic movies out these days, we are already beginning to smell the staleness, thereby making them ripe for mockery. Deadpool's remark about how there were so few X-Men in the movie because the studio couldn't afford it wouldn't have worked as a joke if it had been released in 2006 when the Marvel Expanded Universe was but a twinkle in Stan Lee's eye. Which is also true of the original Scary Movie, which came out when the 90s teen slasher horror flicks like Scream were at their peak. The same for Naked Gun in answer to the buddy cop shows of the 80s. But what makes these movies work? What makes them tick? What sets them apart from bad parodies like, say, Epic Movie? A parody's ultimate goal is to make you laugh, right? Well, yes and no. I'd argue that while a bad parody just aims for laughs, a good parody not only makes you laugh, but makes you think. Good parodies are smart. Bad parodies feel kitschy and cheap, not because of lack of budget, but because it seems to aim lower than the movie it is attempting to make fun of. Gags that work less like tweezers as it picks apart the genre, and more like a mallet filled with cream pies. But let me put it this way. A parody is like observational humour, yeah? It points out the mundane tropes of the everyday, with a slight twist for humorous effect. Now, a good comedian will offer a fresh slant on the observation, on the everyday, maybe subvert it so you don't know where it's going, or point out a tiny little observation that you think is so niche you swore it was only you who thought that way until you hear a stadium of 50,000 other people roar at the same joke. A bad comedian, on the other hand, just regurgitates that everyday trope, spun with nothing more than adding a funny voice or over-the-top gestures. And it's on an observation we all know and have heard 100 better jokes about before. And when that bad comedian gets a poor response, he'll repeat the joke again, louder and with more exaggeration in the hope it's funny the next time. Parody movies work the same way, and the very best of them don't just make you laugh, but they surprise you and make you think, oh, that's a good point, I never noticed that. In that sense, the good parody outwits the thing it is trying to mock, pointing out the not so obvious tropes as much as the obvious. I mean, for example, how many of us ever considered the concept of the superhero landing before Deadpool mentioned it? But most of all, Deadpool works because it tells a proper story. It is at the heart of all successful parodies. Think about it. All the weak parody movies out there eschew the plot for just riffing on tropes, while the vague ghost of a plot maybe sulks around the edges of the movie. Having a solid structure of a story in a parody, however, allows the humour to bounce off of something firsthand, giving the joke a foundation so it is clear exactly what it is lampooning. This is why Deadpool very deliberately tells a rather basic origin story. If it tried to do something overly complex or original, then the material wouldn't be there for the parodying of the superhero genre. On the flip side, having a thin plot or no plot at all would make the film feel like the equivalent of a blooper reel. Funny, but weightless and quickly growing tiresome. Successful parodies like Deadpool may look effortless in execution and freewheeling in attitude, but make no mistake, more thought goes into them than the movies they poke fun at. And that's something all creators of parody and satire should heed, lest they become the butt of the joke. And that's it for today's showcase. Thank you very much for listening, readers. The written version of this is on my website, the link of which you can find in the description just below, along with all my other links to my social media and so on. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.